Peter immediately raced to his fiancée's assistance after spotting the monstrous beast. Louvilla finds herself in serious jeopardy as the worm goblin ends up coming up to her, despite Peter appearing to be moving as quickly as he can on horseback. Peter somehow makes it just in time for Louvilla to avoid suffering catastrophic injuries, and he quickly amputates the monster's arms to set his fiancée free. The other adventurers are unsure if Peter would be able to defeat the beast on his own, but Peter proves why he is known as the strongest man in the planet by completely thrashing the beast. Such a display of strength kinda backfires for Peter because it increased the ogre's curiosity even more. Peter shares a nice moment with Louvilla again, but afterwards while he was in a public bath the curse was making Peter's body act funny, and to save himself from embarrassment outside, Peter had to give in to Vegan's blackmailing and literally beg her to remove his curse. As recent events had gotten Peter even closer to Louvilla, the situation was causing Santos to feel some real emotional damage. The old head was withering in pain alone in the night, when a letter from a partnering nation makes the situation different, as now Santos decides to plot Peter's demise. The next morning Santos calls Peter and tells him about how he will be attending an arranged marriage proposal that was from the Orkland princess Piglet Pancetta. Peter finds such a demand offensive, since he was already engaged to Santos's daughter. But before he could say anything further, Louvilla overhears the news and comes to join a conversation. Santos' assistant presents the scenario in such a way that it appears to be a crucial requirement for Peter's nation's prosperity. After Santos clearly remarked that Peter would have no obligation to accept the proposal, Peter ended up complying to the request, while he was sitting with Piglet's father. Peter convinces himself that he will just be disgusted by the looks of an orc princess, but to his surprise Piglet looked like a normal-ish human. The old head gives Peter a smirk and tells him to show Piglet around town. Peter does that, but as Piglet was feeling off he sits down in an alley to consult her. Piglet was self-conscious about her looks, but Peter tries to reassure her as he also saves her from random thugs. After the two go around town, the time to give an answer arrives at night. Peter clearly states that he only was interested in Louvilla, but the old heads seem to be not satisfied by just that. Peter is sent to a special room by Santos, and outside we find the old man laughing as his plan to secure Louvilla was on the move as well. Santos had drugged Peter's drink earlier so his desires would heighten, and to make matters worse he forced Peter to share a room with Piglet. The night passes by somehow, and on the next morning the couple is called by the old man again to hear back from them. Peter was pretty sure that he had screwed up his relationship with Louvilla, but to his surprise Piglet announced in front of everyone how Peter was a total gentleman in his time around her. Peter gets absolutely shocked. After the situation takes such an interesting turn, and to make matters worse for Peter, Piglet puts forward a request to move into the guild so she can be closer to Peter, and outside after the meeting had concluded Piglet shows her sadist side, and we see how the problems were just getting bigger and bigger for Peter. As now he had to deal with Piglet and her wishes to be his mistress and have kids as well. Later on, in the nighttime Piglet ends up moving into Peter's place as well, and while she is trying to feed Peter hand-cooked food, such a situation does not fit well with the other girls. Vegan was also there, and she first picks a fight with the ogre sisters, and later on with Piglet. Vegan is getting bullied so badly that Peter had to step in to calm the girls down, but he makes things worse as now the girls were full of rage and willing to hold a little competition. The competition goes nowhere, and in the end Peter is literally crying looking at what has become of his life. A guy named Tim who lived in the same building happened to pass by Peter's room, and as Peter asks Tim for help he gets all of the girls getting badly drunk. The alcohol makes the girls go wild, and in the end poor Peter gets cornered once again. Since the tournament ended up producing 0 results, all the girls were equally willing to be Peter's mistresses. The 4 of them sit down on the next day to form some sort of rules so every one of them gets to spend time equally with Peter. The girls fight over the rules and end up forming a treaty, where Peter at least gets a day off from the 4 of them. As his first rest day arrives, Peter intends to spend this precious free time with Louvilla, so they can get to spend some time together on their first date. Peter gets all dressed up to meet Louvilla for this long-awaited date. Then before he leaves, Tim congratulates him. Peter meets up with Louvilla somewhere out in town, and the pair goes around on a shopping trip having a lot of fun. At night the two sit down to have a nice dinner, and Peter really appreciates just how lucky he is to have a pure woman like Louvilla as his fiancée. The dinner gets disturbed when Mimi arrives to annoy Peter, and the guy has to deal with her so she won't spill any beads. Despite the contract the girls had signed, Peter ended up dealing with them throughout the dinner, and at the end Louvilla just kept drinking while remembering the time she fell for Peter. The date concludes, and as the two are walking back, a certain sense of awkwardness makes Peter worry about just how long he will be able to hide his secret mistresses from Louvelia. Messing up on the very first date he got with Louvelia was already bothering Peter, and after realizing that the treaty signed earlier didn't really mean anything to these monster girls, Peter ended up running out of the bath he was in pure rain. The guy is running wild in the rain with guilt from mistreating Louvelia and her trust constantly making him feel like crap. Peter ends up sitting down in the rain since he was unable to control his emotions, and there he happens to come across a big strong ogre who offers to lend him an ear. Peter explains what was going on to this big man named Antonio Spartacus, and he helps a fellow man out explaining his own ideas about the concept of love. Peter was pretty happy after Antonio reassured him that he still had a chance, and just for this reason Peter wanted to help Antonio out in return as well. Antonio explains how he was in this town looking for the woman he loved for many years, and even though Peter had a smile on his face earlier learning that Antonio was after Lisa, made his expressions completely switch up. The revelation absolutely stunned Peter, and hence he heads back to his place to confirm the news with Lisa. Even though Lisa was trying to play it off at first, she accepts the claim at the end, remarking that she is the crown princess, and essentially the next queen of Augustan. While all this drama is going on in Peter's room, outside receptionist Michi comes across Antonio, who was here for an inquiry, and develops quite an interest in his manly muscles. Antonio was at the guild to just gain some intel, but he ends up squaring with Peter as he got pissed after coming to know that Lisa was one of the girls Peter mentioned back outside. The ogre starts swinging his weapon in rage, and Peter had to defend himself with literally a single banana. Antonio stops after hearing Lisa's voice, and she sits him down to talk formally. Apparently Lisa was stronger than every single other ogre, so that was the reason she chose to start a family with Peter and have kids with him. The disrespect was too much for Antonio, as he felt bad for being treated like this despite all the time and effort he had put into his training. As the last resort, Antonio decides to challenge Peter to a duel for the crown princess, and Peter had to accept, even though he didn't really want to bother. While Peter was waiting for the first fight to begin, he has a genius idea to throw the match intentionally and send Lisa back to Augustan once and for all. But sadly Peter is read like a book by Lisa, who blackmails him into trying something cute if he wishes to keep a secret from Louvelia. Peter starts feeling terrible, as even though he didn't want to win, he had no other choice but to try. The warriors step up to show respect to each other, and before pulling out his weapons, Antonio delivers a beautiful speech that turns the audience completely against Peter. Every single person in the arena wanted Peter to lose. But to Peter's bad luck, he wasn't allowed to. The moment the match starts, Peter ends up reluctantly winning by a single blow and pisses the whole crowd off. Antonio had no clue of what just happened, and he starts the back for another chance from Lisa. Lisa accepts, but she tells Antonio to face her a few days from now. As the crowd leave the arena, Antonio now starts begging Peter to take him as a student, but even though he was unsure of what to do at first, Peter accepts Antonio's request, seeing it as a way of getting rid of Lisa. For the next few days Peter puts Antonio through a hell of training, and at the end of his sessions he becomes a completely different beast. On the fight day, Antonio finishes his warm-up drill earlier, so he sits down with the receptionist Michi with the whole group, noticing just how well the two get along. The match begins as soon as Lisa arrives. But after seeing Antonio move really slowly, Peter falls to his knees, realizing that this match is just a lost cause. Peter's prediction turns out to be spot on when Antonio lands on the ground, brutally knocked out. Later on, when Antonio wakes up in the infirmary, he has no idea of what he just did. Right at that moment, Michi arrives to look after Antonio, and seeing the two of them, Peter comes up with a new plan. He explained so Antonio just where he was making a mistake, but in the next morning when Peter was ready for Antonio's rematch, the ogre leaves him stunned, as he had now moved on from Lisa and wanted to be with Michi. Peter clearly knew the horrors of waiting him when Lisa thanked him for his help, but seeing Louvelia come to him calm the guy down. Peter was pretty happy for a few moments, but Louvelia breaks the news as to how they now had to deal with the goblin invasion. Peter heads out on the first real adventure ever since the show began, promising to keep Louvelia safe. So today up to this, now my recap come to an end. The link of the previous video is given in the description. Here are some other video. I hope you like it. Thanks for watching.